All right, now that we have some of the C# essentials out of the way, let's take a look at data types that we will be encountering when we get into C# coding. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about a few of the basic data types. These don't include Revit data types at this time. We'll get into those as we start coding, but let's cover some of these essentials. The basic data types that we're going to encounter when it comes to creating zero-touch nodes for Dynamo are string, boolean, numbers, which are doubles or integers, or var. Var is a little more mysterious in a way. Strings are essentially any series of characters, text. If you've used Dynamo any amount of time, you are familiar with strings. They're anytime you enter a parameter name or anything like that in Dynamo. Oftentimes, we double click for a code block, put a quote, and type in a string. In C#, you put in quotes as well to type in strings, so that carries over from Dynamo, which is really handy. Booleans, or bool, are true or false values or 0 or 1 values. These are items that we can use to filter other items. Parameters in Revit that are checkboxes are booleans. Those have 3 states actually, so true, false, and unknown, which is kind of weird and not a thing a lot of people know. So something to keep in mind. Booleans are something that we will interact with quite a bit as we build zero-touch nodes, especially depending on what kind of nodes you want to make. Numbers, doubles, or integers. There's a few ways to represent numbers in C#. A double has a decimal precision, so 1.0 could be a double, and an integer does not, which would just be like the number 1. So 1.0 and the number 1 look very similar. One's a double, one's an integer. So keep that in mind in Dynamo, but also in C# as you're working on creating these nodes. Something very important to keep in mind. Var is an implicitly typed local variable. It lets the computer figure it out. This will make more sense as we get into C#, but instead of telling Visual Studio what you're working with, like a Revit wall, you say var, and then you define a variable, and then it figures it out for you. We'll use var some, but it is better to specify what you're working with because Visual Studio helps you figure out what you can do to that object based on the type that you tell Visual Studio that it is. We'll see that when we start coding our first zero-touch node as well. With all this in mind, let's take a look at the API docs real quick and see a few places that some of these data types appear. All right, so here we are in apidocs.co once again. We are on the wall class like we were in the previous lesson. Let's go ahead and scroll through and look at a property. We're going to go ahead and click on name, and we will see that it is a string data type. So on apidocs.co, we're able to see what data type we're getting returned when we commit a method on an object or we query it for a property. In the case of name, that is a string or text, which I think we'd expect when it comes to getting a wall's name. We expect it to be text. So that's what we are getting from that. Further elaborating on this, we do have this get and set option in the curly braces on apidocs.co. When it comes to the Revit API, we're able to get the parameter of name or set the parameter of name. Sometimes you will just see get on here, you won't see set. So that's one way of knowing what is possible with the API as well. If we look at category, for instance, we can see that it's returning a data type of category. That is a Revit data type, not a basic data type. And we can see that we have get as an option. You can't change a wall's category, so there's no set option in the curly braces. Really important to keep in mind when it comes to interacting with these API objects and the Revit API. Clicking on the object type, you can see that the category inherits from API object, and expanding the class properties, you can see that it also has a name property that is a string. You can't change a category's name, so it does have just a get option in the curly braces. Another thing that you can find out just by digging into the API a little bit. All right, so pretty short lesson. We covered some of the basic data types and we looked at the data types as they apply to the Revit API. In the next lesson, we're going to look at creating our first zero-touch node. We are going to reiterate data types within that lesson as well, so it's something that's going to carry through the rest of this course, so something to keep in mind. With that in mind, I once again encourage you to poke around the API docs a bit more and look for those data types and see what you see. And other than that, we will see you in the next lesson.